Hello and welcome to the ESG Experience, the podcast brought to you by Goby, the ESG platform. I'm Helee, Chief Revenue Officer at Goby.
And I'm Ryan Nelson, Chief Executive Officer, and we're your hosts for this podcast.
So whether you're an ESG expert or just dipping your toes into the ESG universe to understand how it can help with engaging your stakeholders, mitigating risks, and attracting investors, this podcast is for you. Together, we will continue to navigate the alphabet soup of ESG, discuss ideas, review strategies, and share industry news and trends. In today's episode of the ESG Experience, we will be discussing the new administration, woohoo, how I feel about it, if it's not obvious, and how this administration will intensify the ESG imperative. And we are lucky today to have special guest, Mari Bishop. Super happy to have you. We'll let you introduce yourself shortly. And she is a passionate ESG expert and subject matter expert. So I'm going to hand it over to you to introduce yourself, and also maybe just at the highest levels, what are your initial reactions to this new administration and perhaps your high hopes of what it's going to do for ESG?
Absolutely. Excited to be here. So like Helee said, I am Mari Bishop, one of the managers over at Goby. I manage one of the teams that delivers ESG wonderfulness and more to come of that, I believe. So whatever the upcoming shift in administration might mean to you, from an ESG perspective, it signifies exciting changes that relate to two main aspects, with an intent to highlight climate change risk planning. Those two being regulatory changes and changes to economic policies. So first, to address climate change, Biden has pledged to reinstate the United States signatory status to the Paris Climate Agreement on his first day in the office. Then second, requirements for company ESG disclosure and climate risk planning are the overarching plan to move the needle from principle-based disclosure to rule-based disclosure. Both of these overarching policy shifts will make for an interesting and exciting 2021, I believe, in a good way, different from 2020, we hope.
And maybe if we can ever travel abroad again, we'll stop getting that weird side-eye dirty look of like, I feel like it had to do with us not participating in the Paris Agreement. Like that was half of it. Like, how dare we not participate?
Yeah, so to be clear, Helee, you are not just going to play Switzerland here on your position on the election results.
I thought that this podcast was about the results are signed, sealed, delivered at this point, almost. And my political views have nothing to do with this podcast.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think it's wild that I don't, play politics or know a whole ton, but like the first day thing is that's a powerful thing, right? Like that means that they're making it one of the priorities of you can only do so many things on your first day, and on the first day they're proclaiming to rejoin the Paris Agreement. So
that's a statement right there.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, Mari, good to have you. Like Helee said, and thank you for summarizing some of the Biden-Harris administration's main points. I was thinking about those, and I think that there are great thought leaders in the U.S., which is where we're based, not just where our company serves necessarily, but where we're based. There are great thought leaders in the U.S., but if we are not considered to be a good participant in the climate change discussion, then we kind of lose that voice a little bit. And I think that's where we've been for the last several years now, is we couldn't really engage in the conversation very well because at the highest levels, we basically stepped out of it. And so we were no longer a leader. Do we need to be a leader? Is it important to be a leader? I don't know. I don't necessarily, proclaim that I have to live in the country that happens to be the leader. I mean, it's cool, I guess, and something to strive for. But there's definitely a lot of great innovators and thought leaders and ideas. And now I think this is very positive because those people, those businesses, those individuals will be able to be taken seriously again. Exactly to your point, Helee, you won't be in other countries, getting a side eye. you can actually just engage and maybe even be a little bit further, lead the conversation, which is cool. And then as far as rules and having rules about it, from everything I've studied just in prep for this and everything, and just in general, nearly everyone supports clarity. When you talk about definitions and language and targets, almost everyone, no matter what your position, it's describe what you're talking about. What does ESG mean? How do we achieve it? What is a ESG fund or an impact fund? You know, if people can provide more language and even rules, most people don't like rules per se, but they like definitions and language, and nearly everyone supports transparency, unless of course you're doing something naughty. But if you're not, then you typically support transparency. So clarity, transparency, and being leaders, or at least not being a negative contributor to the discussion is I think really good for businesses and individuals here. And that's, I think there's a quote here from the SEC commissioner. There is room for discussion as to which ESG risks and impacts should be disclosed and how, but the time for silence has passed. And maybe that's just a better way of summarizing all the things I was trying to say.
I love that. The time for silence is past, or, you know, here in this quote, an unsustainable silence. So it's almost like by doing nothing, you're not neutral. You know, by being silent, you're not neutral, you're almost guilty. And one other thing, you know, to point out in the spirit of clarity and transparency, as we see this shift and evolution that's really been, the light has been shined upon it during the events of this year, the pandemic and whatnot, is it's not really just about that E anymore in ESG. You know, for the past decade, I feel like it was all about energy, water, waste, carbon, really heavy on the environmental. And what's really been brought to light, perhaps over the last several years, but magnified in the landscape of this past year, is the S&G matter as well. You know, you saw a recent announcement from the NASDAQ about the need for transparency in leadership, and a mandate that within the next 2 to 5 years, every NASDAQ listed company will need to have both a woman and a minority, can't be the same person, can't get a twofer, two separate people on their boards. And roughly 20% of the companies currently listed on the NASDAQ meet that requirement. So, and if they can't meet that requirement, they're obligated to explain why not. So again, just a bigger lens on the S&G, and just a stronger emphasis on transparency and clarity, like Ryan said. So Mari, I might ask you, I think about climate change, and I know that's one of your passions and areas of expertise. And I think of all the damage that we've done, and I see these things about how we're past the point of no return, and the polar ice caps will never recover, and the wildfires out west this year have never been worse, and this is the worst hurricane season we've ever seen. And maybe some of that is dramatics from the media that likes to keep us in fear and captivated at all times. But in your opinion, your personal opinion as someone who studies this, do you think, is it too late for us as a human race? Have we gone too far? Is that it? We're doomed?
Well, I know you can't see me, but I laugh a little at that because I know that that tends to be one of those excuses that some people might make not to do anything. And I would say my personal take on that is, if there is, you know, and there is some truth to that, right? I mean, in some ways we are past the point of no return, meaning there will be an impact regardless of what we do from here on out, but we absolutely have power over what kind of impact and the magnitude of that impact is going to be. So I think from the business perspective, we should all be excited as that our country will be kind of joining and you know, coming to you know, stand side by side with other requirements, global requirements and goals. Because, you know, as a business, the number one thing that you should fear, that you probably fear the most, is risk and unknowns. So knowing, you know, seeing all others signing up on these things, and, you know, implementing climate change into their plans, into their risk management, and, you know, you perhaps either tried to kind of follow track on that as much as you could, knowing that there's no requirements or standards from the US yet, as of yet, or perhaps, you know, you just waited till that moment came and you knew exactly what you had to do. But regardless, you will know, a lot of this information is already out there. If you go to their campaign website, actually, you can scroll for many, many minutes and keep seeing more and more information on that. You have, it's not a carrot that's just moving in front of you as you walk anymore. You will have goals, and they do align with the rest of the world, especially if you're a global company. This is very important. So it should be exciting to you that there will be less unknowns and less risks with regards to, what does this mean for my business? And then the other side, on a more personal level, like I said, it shouldn't be an excuse not to do anything. And I think at the same time that this is indeed, difficult times to be living through, it's also very exciting times to be living through. It is when you are stuck between, the two corners of that wall that you realize that you have nowhere else to go or nothing else to do, but to make a big change, to take the leap, and to become that expert or that, leader in the space, or simply, to adapt, and not just adapt, but grow and become that next, the next level company that you want to be, or even personally, as a person. I think it's very fulfilling when you do this kind of thing or you integrate this into your everyday work.
So another quote we came across, in preparing for this podcast that, Mari, maybe I'll ask your opinion on. It's possible to view ESG as a response it's possible to view ESG as a response to regulatory failure. If the US government paid attention to things like paid family leave or universal health care, then perhaps investors would find it less pressing to include those objectives in their investment strategies. And this is from Elizabeth Kashner, Director of ETF Research. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that that's true, or is it kind of a chicken and egg thing, if you will?
So, sure, yeah, that is true. And I mean, chicken and egg, I don't know, I think in this kind of industry, there's, there is a way to move forward with the things that you have to do, the standards, the bare minimums, the baselines, while at the same time making sure that you're planning to kind of surpass those kinds of things. But yeah, I would agree. And I'll also be interested to hear about what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I don't know, Ryan, what do you think? Did regulation fail us? I mean, is it up to now the private investor, the private sector, or even the public to put an emphasis on ESG because regulation has failed us? Or do you feel that, and I guess I ask because I talk to people with varying views on this.
Well, personally, I would never, I'm one to not blame things on regulation. I tend to attach what we're going to do and who we're going to be to the end consumer at the end of the day, to the individuals. So if the regulation's not there, ultimately that's on the individuals that didn't put the right people in power and didn't prioritize the right things. So chicken and egg or blame game, I don't know. I think that this comment is accurate. If the government paid attention to things like family leave, universal health care, then yes, we wouldn't have to be pressing so much to make them part of investment strategies. Maybe we'd be in a different position now. But I think that the blame game on that is kind of moot.
Yeah. So I keep the company of friends in many walks of life at the varying ends of the spectrum, from left to right and everything in between. And I recently talked to someone, so, on the far right, don't judge, not a close friend, a friend of a friend of a friend, an acquaintance of a friend, let's say, who said that feels very strongly that whether it's the board, whether it's the leadership within a company, it should be a meritocracy. It should always be the best person for the job. And having mandates like the one I discussed from NASDAQ that you must have a woman on the board, you must have a minority on the board. He went so far as to say that that is racist and sexist. So I think it's somewhere between. I don't blame regulation. I do think that investors shining a light on it. At the end of the day, the almighty dollar has power, right? So if the investor is going to withhold their almighty dollar because these things have not been addressed, and that's a mechanism to make our world a better place or to motivate, put the motivation in the right place, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So, but at the same time, I would hate, I kind of empathize with this position in that I would hate for someone to be looking at two people and saying, you know what, this 45-year-old white man is actually way better for this job, but I have a mandate to fill this seat with a woman. So I'm going to take the person who's going to be less good at the job because I got to meet this mandate. So I think it still has to figure itself out, but I personally, I'm appreciative of the legislation and the shove in the right direction, or the motivation from investors that say you may not have my almighty dollar if you're not doing these things or demonstrating to me that you're doing these things. I'm cool with it. So Ryan, I'm going to ask you, you run a business, you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder. What is your honest take on that? Are we just checking a box here? Or do these types of things really matter? And more importantly, do they create real value in a business, in your opinion?
Yes. I mean, the short answer, yes, I do think they create real value. I mean, is it racist or sexist? I mean, maybe someday you could make that case, but we need to think at the macro level here of all the decisions that have been made for decades or hundreds of years and how we got here in the first place. If you can't find a super qualified, incredible woman or minority to fill that position, then you're not searching properly. Like, that's the whole point. You're just the network effect of, you're just the same thing. So this reality of saying, I'm staring down this situation where I couldn't fill this and now I have to take the lesser qualified candidate, I just don't really think that's real, frankly. I would go even further to say you should still do it if that's the situation, just because at the macro level, we need, just of what's happened for decades, we need to position things differently for change. You had a comment probably on that, Mari, I would imagine.
Yeah, so actually, yes, I agree. And I would also like to build up that a policy or a mandate that is done right should have mechanisms within it that do not allow for this kind of situation to happen that you mentioned, Helee. So I had to hire this person, regardless of whoever else applied, because this person was, I needed another person of color to check my boxes. It shouldn't be a box checking exercise. The whole point of having, anything D&I related, a policy, a mandate, a regulation, is that you are, creating a standard, a minimum, a baseline for companies or, any others to follow, and, setting that bar so they know, what it is that they're trying to achieve, but then also exactly how will that take place? How do you get there? So like you were saying, Ryan, it's, you would find it hard to believe that you really couldn't find any person of, of color to apply for your, for your position, or that it made it to your, to your desk to actually review, the top 10 applicants or whatever it might be. Then that also means you are not, your policy, perhaps your internal policy, is not thorough enough in explaining where to look for talent or how to look for talent. So that's one example of things that you can do to build a system that works, and not necessarily just a box to check.
Yeah, so for me, I don't know, at the macro level, again, we've seen what the privileged of the world bring to the table as leaders and what they do in the boardroom. Helee, you and I are constantly sending back, I mean, it's sad maybe, but hilarious, like pictures from Zoom meetings or pictures from websites. And when you look at certain companies and when you look at a CEO forum that I might attend and I take a snapshot, again, I want to say funny, but I mean, yeah. It is
a whole lot of vanilla.
Wild. So we've seen what those people do for decades now. Let's see what we can be accomplished when strategy at the leadership table is set by a diverse representation of humans. Let's see what that would be like. I think there's there. So to the long answer, there is value there. Yes, there is value there. It will be different, most likely, the way that things are addressed, and hopefully different good. I want to bring this pop culture reference in. One of my favorite artists is Jack White. He's been in several bands now. And I might have mentioned this last time, but now I got the actual quote. So this is a pop culture, a crazy, gritty artist, but this is what he says. And this is just a point of view. You're going to get different point of view. He says, what I've noticed working with women is that a lot of BS goes out the window and the focus is on accomplishing the task and getting down to something. Guys walk in the room with a lot of other agendas, egos, hangups, especially 20-something white hipsters. They bring so much BS to the table that you have to sift through it. Then they turn around and sabotage you a week later because of all those hangups. I haven't really experienced that working with females. So again, just fun pop culture reference, but there is a difference when you bring different people, different points of view, different backgrounds to the table. You're going to get a different strategy and different tactics, and for better or for worse, even I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to this notion of diverse representation. So you have some of that diversity you're seeing now more so in the workplace, but it just hasn't trickled up to the boardroom just yet. I'm confident that it will. And I, my position, I wouldn't consider myself to be a feminist. I have some feminist tendencies, but, also as a business owner, I feel like I can be objective about certain things. And again, it just comes back to, you want those faces around the table that are driving the ship to be accurate and representative of the rest of the people. And it's not that those people in the room can't be empathetic. It's not that. It's just that sometimes you need someone to be the active voice of the others because there are things that they don't even think of. And, one example I think of during the pandemic, so if I think of just the faces around our boardroom, we had an early meeting, March, April, when we started to talk about what this next year was going to look like. And the focus was around, how are we going to get back in the office, or what safety measures, how much hand sanitizer do we have to buy? Are we taking temperatures at the door or not? No one, just maybe because of the demographic, had brought up, well, what about all the working parents? If you look at our leadership team, it's 80% comprised of working parents who now don't have childcare because schools are closed, and that's going to affect their ability to work. So, you have to have those different perspectives represented. Otherwise, you're not going to make necessarily, decisions that are inclusive of everyone. And inclusivity is part of it as well. So the acronym is not just D&I, it's DE&I. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's really, it's multifaceted, I guess, if you will. So to me, it's not about jamming someone in a seat and checking a box. And the other thing I'll say is that, bring different perspectives. One thing I think that we do well at Goby is we do hire people with all kinds of backgrounds. A lot of people that are, first generation in the United States or have grown up in other countries, and they just bring such an interesting, different worldly perspective, not just to business, but to life. I enjoy getting to know people that didn't grow up here, that aren't part of the vanilla cookie cutter snapshot box that, we were talking about. So, and they bring unique ideas to the table. So I believe it's true. And I'm a supporter.
Yeah, I agree. I'll throw in there, just to echo what you just said, Helee, that one of the things that we're pretty well known for, I think, within our space is our, perhaps not so much right now that we're all working from home, but we still have our happy hours and fun times over camera. But our work culture is pretty famous within our space, and I think one of the reasons why that's the case, why we have such good working relationship with each other, and we achieve what we can achieve, is because of that diversity aspect.
Agreed. So again, we agree it brings value to an organization. So Mari, we've been talking about a little bit, but now let's say you've got your written policy, rules, clarity, you've got a theory of what we want to do, all those sorts of things, but the success and our fate ultimately depend on, as Helee likes to say, where the rubber hits the road and the tactical execution. So we're all excited, as you can see so far, about the new administration, but will they GSD, which means get stuff done, I
Not
believe.
stuff, though. Not stuff.
Oh, not stuff.
The PC podcast
That's
edited
the PC.
version of.
I had to edit Jack White's words, and I edited my own to get stuff done. Do you think they'll get stuff done, or is it a first day announcement, a little bit of hype, and then that's it?
Well, I certainly hope they do, and I want to believe they will, and mostly because it's not just them. It's not just a few people that get in that room and decide on whatever it is that, you know, the goals are for the next, you know, day, week, month, years. It's because just like I think it was you, Ryan, mentioned earlier, you know, it is a strong it is a strong take to put out there for the world to see that there is commitment for this. And that will definitely bring about, you know, a wave of other people who are not sitting in that room making the decisions, but regardless are being impacted by the decisions. So that's, you know, it's up to, you know, all the way up to us. It definitely sends a different kind of message. It definitely, you know, raises up the fire on our butts and it will get us all, you know, to do more, faster, better. So I'm excited for that. Not so much what exactly they'll be doing in that one room, but what everything else that's going to happen because of that.
Well, Mari said butts now, so I guess I don't know if that changes the rating. 13, I said stuff. She said butts, so it's getting crazy.
Well, that's
yeah. All right, so I think we kind of had the question, you know, is it too late, sort of thing. You know, I'm hopeful.
Can we save the polar bears?
I'm hopeful. I don't know if I have been hopeful or if I'm that far over the line, but I am hopeful. And the other thing about, you know, addressing and solving and moving the needle, I think, to kind of wrap things up here, you know, I believe in the compassion of humans. A lot of people say, well, they'll only do it if it's financially driven. And I don't actually believe that to be true. I believe in the compassion of humans, and a lot of leaders that are doing the right thing are doing it for other reasons. But also, it'd be really powerful and nice when ESG is also supported by or driven by capitalism. Then that'll be the guarantee that it's gonna move in the right direction. Where the capital goes, where the innovation goes, where that sort of stuff goes, then there's no turning that train around. And there's been a lot of talk about corporations believing that they have a responsibility to all the stakeholders and not just the financial shareholders. And to me, you know, I read Ayn Rand and all that stuff, and I get it, and I believe in ego and capitalism to an extent. I don't even think that pulls against that too much. I mean, against capitalism, if you will. You need the stakeholders to be healthy and well to have a business. In the employees, the community that you're nearby, the community that you impact throughout your supply chain, all that fits within that. So the fact that businesses recognize that it's not that and they've made formal statements. Before, there was I think it was Friedman, whoever, it was like, a business exists to make money for its shareholders. And that was the thesis, and businesses just lived by it. They're starting to say that differently. No, businesses exist to improve society or to improve the position of all their stakeholders, which is different than their shareholders. So anyway, we're excited about the new administration. We believe there's hope. And we believe that first day announcement, or, you know, joining the Paris Agreement, means that there's actually legs to this, and the rubber will meet the road, as they say. So the future is bright. And that brings us to Beer or Beans, the segment that everybody, all of our listeners are dying to hear. I'm switching it up. I'm going to ask Mari today, Helee. I'm sorry, but I'm going to quiz Mari.
That's good. I'm like 1 for 1, so I'm cool.
You're 1 for 1. You got it right.
Stick with
that.
The
answer was beer, I believe, last time you got it right. So, Mari, all you have to do is say beer or beans and guess this artisan craft situation I'm about to tell you about. Or barley or beans. I got to call it barley or beans. That's the clever way I want to do it. Barley is beer. Is this artisan barley or artisan beans? I'm just going to give you the name. It's called Bear Coast.
Barley beer?
It is not. You're wrong. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't drink beer. So that's, you would have asked about wine. I would know, but I'll take it. Okay.
But the thing is, wine starts with a W, beans start with a B. So we have to do barley or beans. This is called Bear Coast. They're really proud about their artisan coffee. They have 2 locations. One of those is in San Clemente, California. Can anyone connect why I chose San Clemente to find this? It is the headquarters of a great new customer of ours called CareTrust REIT. They're out of San Clemente, California. So I chose this. So shout out to them. They acquire and lease senior housing and healthcare properties across the country. So we're super excited to be working with CareTrust REIT.
Yes, we are.
All right, friends. Well, thank you all, our thousands of listeners, for tuning in to this episode of the ESG Experience. Spoiler alert for our next show, we will be discussing best practices for creating a corporate social responsibility report with Kelly Meisner, who is the Director of Sustainability at Ventas. And if you have not seen their sustainability report and you'd like a homework assignment before episode 3, have a look. It truly is what I would refer to as the palace of CSR reports. Very well done. So we appreciate our loyal subscribers for listening. And if you want to continue the ESG conversation between episodes, do follow us on your favorite social media channel at #ESG Experience. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Mari.